sir. Okay, now I want to explain about our material about the discourse analysis. But before that, I introduce myself. My name is Theodore Shotang, my NPM 2201030013. So this is the question for our exam. The first question is 5 definition of discourse analysis. According to Brown and Newell, 1983, discourse analysis is the concrete with the analysis of the language in use. This definition highlights that the language should not be studied as the set of abstract rules of the grammatical structures, but the reader as that it's actually used by the people to communication in real-life situations. For example, when someone says, "It's cold in here," they might not just be giving information, but implying a request such as, "Please close the window." The second is, according to discourse analysis as the study of how structures of the language, when disconstructed together with their textual, social, psychological context, become the meaning and the insight for their users. This means discourse analysis is not only about the structure of sentence, but about how people connect words, idea, and sentence to form the correct and perfect message. For example, because you are worthy. This short price only makes sense with it in physiological, and it's the happens to self-worth and identify, not just the product inside. The third, according to Skiffern, discourse analysis is the study of the language from social practice, where discourse is viewed as the way of the presenting and constructing that the word through the language. For example, later imagery flood the border. And then the fourth, according is Skiffrin. Skiffrin defines discourse analysis as the study of language used above the sentence or the clause level, focusing on how structures of the language form the core-oriented communication. She views discourse as more than grammar or vocabulary. It's about the how sentences are decoded, organized, and interpreted with the intersectional context. For example, it was raining heavily. The streets were the empty. Suddenly, a car stopped in the front of the house. And according Gee defines discourse analysis as the study of how language is used on his side that enables effective, identifies, and social relationship. For example, in the classroom, when a teacher says, "Can anyone tell me the answer?" It's not just a question, it's also a stabilized author and the participants the rules. So we can conclude the five researchers about what is uh, the meaning of the discourse analysis. We can see about the Brown and Yule, Cook, Key, and Fairlodge and studies. Right? Okay. So the question number two, or the second question, why do we study discourse analysis? Okay. We know discourse analysis is very important, especially we the students. So we must continue to our. We know about the meaning text maybe. So the first function to why we learn about the discourse analysis. The first is to understand how language works in real life communication. According Brown and Yule, uh, discourse analysis is the essential because it allows us to study language in the actual use narrated that in this isolated sentence. For example, when someone says, "How are you?" in formal setting, then the function polite greeting rather than the granite inquire about the health. And the second function is to interpret meaning beyond grammar and sentence. According to Cook, studying discourse enables us to move beyond grammar and understand how meaning emerges from the connected sentence. For example, In a news article, the press it was claimed that it incitates the ingredients showing meaning beyond literal view. And the third, to understand the relationship between language and the context. According to Gee, language cannot be separated from the context in which it occurs. Discourse analysis teaches us that the meaning depends on the social, culture, and the situational background. For example, a teacher comments that the appropriate may mean praise or the gentle correction of the tone and the classroom culture. Okay, the fourth, to reveal how language reflects and shapes society. According to Firestclough, discourse is the form of social practice. Through the discourse analysis, we can see how the language both reflects and shapes power, ideology, and social relationships. For example, have a, for example, a government speech using words like freedom, security, or the enemy frames the national issue ideologically. And the five, to understand identity and the power relationship in the communication. According to Van Dijk, discourse is the powerful tool for understanding how speaker constructs identify and social hierarchy. For example, in a meeting, a manager might control the topic and interprets the subordinates, showing a power through discourses behavior. And six, to improve critical thinking and communication skill. According to Steve Prince, learning discourse analysis enhances our ability to think critically about the communication. For example, when someone says that interesting, the listener can interpret whether it means the genuine interest or the polite disagreement. The seventh, to support effective language teaching and learning. According to Mike Carty, discourse analysis helps teachers and the learners understand how the authentic language works in the real communication. And the eight, to analyze media, politics, and the culture discourse. According to First Cloach and the Findage, discourse analysis is vital for studying how media and the political language have the ideology and practices. For example, a headline like "Migrants Swarm the City" uses the emotionally charged for it to influence the public opinion. 9. To understand how meaning is negotiated in the interaction. According to Tannen, discourse analysis helps us see how meaning is the constructed during conversation. For example, when someone says, "You know what I mean," they invite the confirmation and share understanding from the listener. And the last is to connect the language with the other disciplines. According to the studies, discourse analysis is the interdisciplinary connecting linguistics, sociology, psychology, and anthropology. For example, research on online discussion combines linguistic study with the social psychology to explore identity and group behavior. Okay? We continue the third question is discourse analysis of meaning and use for the oral and the written. Okay, so the first is meaning of discourse analysis. Discourse analysis is the study of how language is used in the communication, not just the system of grammar or vocabulary, but a tool for expressing meaning, identity, and the relationship in real life. According to Stubbs, discourse analysis studies language above the sentence level, meaning it's the focus on how the sentence connects to form meaning conversation, speeches, or the text. For example, when someone says, "Can you pass the salt?" they are not asking about the ability, but politely the requesting an action. Okay, the second is purpose of discourse analysis. The main purpose of the studying discourse analysis is to understand how the language functions in authentic communication. For example, when a political derives certain word the like unity or the together. It shows or the effort to influence social perception and values. The third use of discourse analysis is spoken discourse. Spoken discourse refers to language used in moral communication, such as the conversation, storytelling, interviews, or the classroom discussion. For example, conversation between the two friends. You coming later? Yeah, maybe. Although incomplete, that the meaning is colored to the shared context and understand. The fourth is feature of the spoken discourse. Spoken discourse is the interactive and dynamic, involving immediate feedback between the speakers and the listener. It often includes pauses, fillers, informal expression, and the really having on verbal cues such as the gesture on the tone. For example, praise like you know, I mean, or I like are used to maintain the flow of the conversation and the build social connection. 5. Importance of discourse analysis in spoken communication is by the analyzing spoken discourse, we can understand how people create social relationships and express politeness and manage communication effectively. And 6. Use of discourse analysis in written discourse. Written discourse refers to any use of the language in written form such as the essay, articles, reports, or the letters. For example, in an essay, transition words like therefore, however, and in the conclusion have connected idea logically. And 7. Features of the written discourse. Written discourse is the organized expression that designed for the audience, not representing theory writing. It's usually follow a defined structure including introduction, body, and the conclusion. For example, a new article typically begins with the headline, provides background information, and ends with the concluding statement. Okay? Comparison between the spoken and writing discourse. This session comprises the characteristics of the spoken and writing discourse according to Noonan 1993. Okay, understanding about the types help the listeners use the language appropriately in the reference context. Okay, the aspect is medium, structure, and style, context, and the feedback. In the medium, the spoken discourse is oral or sound, and the writing is written or the visual. And the structure and style, the spoken discourse is spontaneous, flexible, informal, often includes filler and impact the sentence. The written discourse, plain, organized, formal, uses the full sentence and chooses this phrase like therefore or however. And the context and the feedback for the spoken discourse share and the immediate support by the gesture and the tone, and the feedback is instant. And the written discourse listen and the explicit feedback or the interaction. Okay, 9 is practical use of the discourse analysis. Discourse analysis has wide the implications across disciplines. It is useful in language learning and teaching, media and literary analysis, social linguistics, and the last is professional communication. For example, in the political speech, leadership like "we will fight," "we will win," it the implies an emotional impayable, showing how the discourse shapes an identity. And the last is discourse analysis help us to understand how language creates meaning in the both spoken and the written forms. And the linked language context proposed and the audience related how the people use words to express idea, emotion, and the values. Okay, the next question or the fourth question is difference in linguistic form and the function and describe by giving example of the spoken and written language sentence and the utterances. Okay, so the first is introduction to discourse analysis. Discourse analysis is not only about the structure of grammar of language, but also about its meaning and the functional in real communication. Language is both a form, how it's structured, and function, why it's used. For example, two people may use the same sentence structure, but their purpose may differ depending on the context or And the second is the understanding linguistic form. Linguistic form refers to the grammatical and structural aspects of the language, how words, phrase, and sentences are arranged according to linguistics. For example, the sentence "Can you open the door?" in the interrogative in form because it follows the structure of the question. The third, understanding linguistic function. Linguistic function is the purpose of the intention behind a linguistic expression while something is said. For example, a talk, "Can you open the door?" looks like a question. It's functional of the polite request, not only literary question about the ability. The fourth is the difference between form the function is the form to grammatical shape of the sentence, the function, the identity, the meaning, the communication, a purpose. For example, "You are going to sit down, not right." And the form declarative less question said, and the function given the instruction the politely. This shows that the one from the can form different function depending on tone and the context. Uh, 5. The concept of the sentence. Sentence is grammatical unit that express a complete truth in the written forms. For example, the teacher asks the students to submit their work. The sentence is the structurally correct and the complete in itself, independent of context. And the sixth, the concept of the utterance. Utterance. And the utterance is a unit of spoken language that carries meaning in a specific context. For example, submit a letter, okay? Though the informal and the incomplete is the written sentence is full utterance, the confirmation showing the shared understanding. Uh, so, 7. Spoken language forms and function. Its spoken discourse meaning often depends on the intonation, pauses, and the shared context rather than the strict grammar. For example, "It's hot in here." For the form declarative sentence, function indirect request, this show how the function extends beyond the literal form that's in spoken language. 8. The written language from the end function. In written discourse, meaning relies more the structure, punctuations, and organization. For example, sentence is, "In conclusion, it's important to mention improvement the balance." Ninth, sentence and the utterance. A sentence is a complete grammatical structure found in the written language, following a formal rules of syntax and the punctuation. In the express a full idea independent of the context. The meeting starts, for example, the meeting starts at 9 a.m. So the last in the discourse analysis from the function are the inseparable, but this phrase from the tells us how language is structured. Function tells us why it's used. Okay, the last question is describe key role of the context interpretations, pragmatics, and discourse context, the context of the situation. The role of the context in interpretation language cannot be understood only by the words or grammar, meaning depends heavily on the context. Context creates how the listener and the readers interpret what is the said or the written. Without the same sentence can mean different things. For example, "It's cold in here." "It's cold in here." Literal meaning is the temperature is low. Contextual meaning a request to close the window maybe. So the context refers to all the background knowledge, for circumstances, and the social settings that shape how the language is interpreted. Types of context have the four types of context is the physical context, social context, cultural context, and linguistic context. Or maybe we can see and we read uh, what the types of the context for that. For example, the bank is closed. The bank is closed. Could mean at the final bank river bank depending on linguistic and physical context. So the pragmatic and the context. Pragmatic is the study of the meaning in context, how the speaker uses in the interpret language beyond its literal sentence. For example, "Can you pass the salt?" And grammatically a question, but the pragmatically a polite request. And the pragmatic explain how the meaning changes according to situation and the relationship. And discourse context refers to how meaning is shaped by the flow of the sentence and the ideas within the text or the conversation. For example, are you coming the are you coming to the party? I have a lot of homework. The response is indirect but the clearly means no in discourse context. The text of the situations, according to M.A. Carr and A.T. Halliday, the text of the situations or context of situation explain how the meaning arises from three key variables: is the first field, the second tenor, the third mode, and the last is together. Oh no, have the three. Sorry, the fourth is wrong. So it's the fourth is the conclusion, right? The fourth is together that shape the way language is structured and interpreted. For the example of the text situation, of a teacher say to a student, "Can you open your book on the page 10?" Field the classroom interaction, tenor teacher, auxiliary students or learner, mode is spoken face to face. The meaning is not a question about the ability, but the polite instruction based on the situation. Okay, maybe we can see more to PPT maybe for the example. So the interpretation of the meaning in discourse depends on the context, not just the words or grammar. Pragmatics explain how the people use language to achieve communication goals, and discourse context how meaning differs across the sentence, and the text the situation connects the language to its improvement, participant, and the purpose. Understanding context allows us to interpret language the accurately, effectively, effectively in the both spoken and the written communication. Okay, until here uh, my explanation about the discourse analysis. If I have wrong words, I apologize. Thank you.